we've got our last speaker. He's the CEO of Pepans, Sergeant Pepans' Happy Hearts Club Band, and his role is to develop policy, to build stakeholder relationships, to test business cases, to build technical expertise and to grow the health and safety culture within the industry. Pepans, of course, is the Petroleum Exploration and Production Association of New Zealand. Its CEO is going to speak to us now. Huge welcome, please, for CEO from Pepans, David Robinson.
Thank you very much, Jim, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all surviving the afternoon session straight after lunch. I think there's been some pretty interesting things that have covered this afternoon, and I'd certainly like to acknowledge my fellow panellists as well. It's great to be part of a team of four who've all got an interesting view and perspective to share with everyone, and I'm no different. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the conversations and challenges after I've finished my address, and I'll try and rattle through that as quickly as I can. But I think the first response I'd make is something that Gareth said about this fork in the roads. And I think we're certainly living in very, very interesting times as people of New Zealand. But to me, it's not about either or, it's about both. You know, it's about developing the resources that we have today and monetising those resources, and that those resources give us choices. And with those resources, we can bridge the gap between, I guess, where we are today, and I'll share a little bit about our dependence on hydrocarbons and where Gareth wants to take us, and I'm right with Gareth on that bus as well. The question is, how do we get there? And I think we've got a technology gap. So I'm with Gareth, I'm with him in the CD store and with my iTunes iPhone downloading from the internet, but legally always. And I guess, you know, you could ask the question as well, you know, why does the Crown back this sector? And look, I think it's fundamentally as simple as the fact that it's the most productive sector in our economy, and that revenue gives us choices to invest in the renewable future that we have. So it's an industry that I'm obviously very proud to represent. I've been in it since 1994. When no one else would give me a job, I was very lucky to get a role with Shell, and it's been a great industry to me and many, many other New Zealanders, as Stuart outlined in his presentation. So let's get into what I've got. I guess Stuart's covered this pretty well, but it's great to see Taranaki Hardcore. You're in the energy province of New Zealand, and I think the Taranaki Hardcore logo is worth just quickly explaining. The barbed wire of the Taranaki farmland, the stars of the Southern Cross, the cog representing the oil and engineering industry, the mountains and the surf, which is ours to treasure here in Taranaki, and the wings of freedom. It's a lifestyle. And of course, this is the surfing brand from Taranaki. But I think what absolutely epitomises Taranaki for me is this logo, where everything fits in, has its place and works together. And as you look around Taranaki over the next few days while you're here, you'll get a very good feel for what that's all about. Now, I think you've just got to have, when we go into this discussion that we're having shortly, a little bit of perspective of where we are from an energy perspective in New Zealand. And I know most of you watched the Switch video yesterday, or I certainly hope you did. Pepans brought Scott Tinker out to New Zealand earlier this year. And what a fantastic guy. He was just so enlightening in terms of his just balanced perspective on where we are in the world today. And I think that's the context that we all have to have going into some of these debates. New Zealand is outstanding from an energy point of view in terms of our renewable position. But when we look at our total energy consumption in New Zealand, the slightly larger half is transport fuels, the slightly smaller half is electricity. And the electricity that we generate today is close to 80% renewable, which is one of the best in the world. There are very few countries that can match us there. The other half, the slightly larger half, are transport fuels. And if you split that in half, the slightly larger half is the commercial fuels, the slightly smaller half is the passenger motor car. Today we have a few electric cars coming into the mix, but they lack scale and any sort of competitive edge with the petrol car. The other half of our use, we actually have no green alternative to use today, and that is a technological problem for us to overcome. I'm not going to dwell on this one because you would have seen Scott Tinker run through all these energy options that we've got for the world. But there are limits to how much we can get these parts of our energy mix to grow. Some of them will work for us. We're big in wind in New Zealand. We're big in geothermal. We're big in hydro. The others not so much. Again, some really big natural barriers to some of the renewable forms of electricity, and that the big nut we have to crack is actually how we store electricity. So solar, for example, in the winter when our electricity demand is highest, when it's dark and gloomy, and actually early in the morning and at night when the sun's gone down, we can't use solar energy until we can figure out how to store it. So that's the challenge we've got. And if the science community has one major goal to achieve, it's how we store that electricity and how we can then use that for other purposes during the day. Again, looking at the world, as we all talk about growing the slice of the pie that's renewable, look at how much of the world's electricity today comes from coal, oil, and natural gas. And this is straight off the International Energy Agency's website last night. And therein lies one of the big problems that we have globally to overcome. We're seeing the natural gas portion grow, and in terms of displacing other forms of hydrocarbons, it's a good thing because natural gas is by far the cleanest form of hydrocarbon energy we have. And today, the conversion of coal to natural gas in the United States has brought US emissions down to 1990 levels, which is something that no other energy initiative could achieve. So that's an interesting thing to perhaps think about. When we reflect on New Zealand as a nation, our productivity is awful. You know, look where we are in the top left-hand corner. We are peddling flat out and going nowhere fast. If New Zealand economy is to improve, we need to be vastly more productive. And the report that's just come out further validates how significant a role the petroleum sector plays in building our productive economy. So it might not be particularly glamorous or particularly trendy, but certainly as an industry it really performs from a jobs and financial perspective. And again, we look at New Zealand's balance sheet and we're not in great shape. And these are some of the hard realities that face us as a nation as we make the choices that we're going to make going into the future. And certainly climate change is a really very, very significant issue for us in New Zealand and around the rest of the world. Another significant issue for us is feeding everybody, making sure we have healthcare and education and all those important things. So all the choices that we have to make a balanced choice on what we are doing to drive them. Let's look at New Zealand oil scene, and I'm going to try and go through this as quickly as I can. We produce about a quarter to a third of our own oil. We export that typically to Australia because we produce higher quality oils and they go very nicely into the Australian refineries. The New Zealand refinery at Marsden Point's an upgrading refinery. It takes thick, heavy black Middle Eastern crudes and upgrades them. So if we didn't develop oil ourselves, we'd still be bringing in, and we do today, a super tanker a week into New Zealand. So about 50 odd super tankers a year come into New Zealand, and then we distribute that fuel via a coastal tanker network around New Zealand. So whether we explore for oil and gas or not, we will still use the same number of hydrocarbons and we will still have an exposure to risk of an oil spill through the tankering operations and other marine operations around New Zealand. I won't go into this, but Stuart's gone over the oil and gas sector in Taranaki, been here for a long time. Times are changing and we've felt those times change as well ourselves as an industry. Couple of key points for you to remember, and that is that oil and gas is in solid rock. It's not in a big puddle under the ground that you just go and drill into. It's not like Jed Clampett and the Hillbillies. It's somewhat more complex than that, and this is just a schematic to give you a bit of an idea. And we're trying to identify traps where oil and gas has come or migrated from source rock into those traps. And when we find those traps and we can drill into them, we can produce from them. When we talk about the oil and gas sector, again, as I've just explained, we've blown one myth out of the water, that it's not a big bubble. We also have a continuum. It's an industry that's characterised by continuums. At one end, we have natural gas that comes out of most of the wells in Taranaki. At the far end of the spectrum, we have heavy sour crude oil that comes out of the Middle East. And you've got every possible combination and mixture along the way. gas and condensate, sweet amber crudes, through to the heavy sours. We tend to be more at the left-hand end here in New Zealand. Again, when we look at the oil wells that we have around the world, we have another broad spectrum. We have high temperature, high pressure wells like Macondo, that when it flowed, this is the Gulf of Mexico well, when it flowed at a rate greater than all of the New Zealand production all put together all at once. So our total combined production could not match the flow out of that well. High pressure, high temperature, 16,800 pounds per square inch. If we look in our own Mangahewa field here, we're in the order of 7,000 pounds per square inch. So a remarkable difference between the two. Many wells don't flow. In fact, the Taranaki wells offshore need to have some sort of artificial lift to get them to come out. And of course, you've got deep sea Macondo at one end of that spectrum, and you've got hydraulic fracturing at the other, where it won't flow through the rock and come out in commercial quantities. So you've got this big extremes. Really important to understand that and the mix. When we refine oil, we get all these products that we use in our society today. And let me assure you, we are absolutely dependent on petroleum. Our life today, whether we like it or not, pivots on this product. Our healthcare, our plastics, our computers, our cars, our clothes, our food. Everything comes from petroleum, be it tractors ploughing the ground, trucks taking food to supermarkets, yourselves going there and buying it. Heating, showers, electricity, the whole box and dice. It is vastly more significant than most of us realise. Again, you've heard that we've got the fourth, fifth largest exclusive economic zone in the world. Absolutely phenomenal. That's the North Sea there with Will and Kate. Very big Will and Kate supporter myself. Not into the Republic of Taranaki, even though you could, because you've got oil and gas, you've got your own bank. Probably draw a line about Hawera, maybe a bit for Waverley perhaps, and then use
I think everybody draws a line at Hawera.
Yeah. Some of my best friends come from Hawera, Jim. I myself come from a village of Wanganui, just south of Hawera. And I can assure you that when you look economically, when my father was born in Taranaki, so I whakapapa back to here, but Taranaki, or New Plymouth and Wanganui were sort of sister cities, and we used to be able to go head to head with Taranaki on the football field. And now that's very different, because Wanganui is in trouble, big trouble. A couple of other Wanganui boys in the audience there. Taranaki's gone ahead, New Plymouth's gone ahead. If you've got a choice where you're going to live, average house price in Wanganui is in the order of $100,000, $150,000. That's if you can find someone to buy it. Quite different in New Plymouth. So, you know, that's just a hard reality. Looking at the New Zealand environment here, we're going to strip away the sediment and we're going to look at the sedimentary basins. Great South and Canterbury basins, very exciting. Some of the exploration going on there. Pegasus Basin coming up to the east of the Cook Strait. The East Coast Basin, we've got a shale play all the way through there. It's never been commercialised. A couple of hundred wells have been drilled there, none successful. Kermadec Trench down there. Coming around, we've got the Kermadecs up the top. Fabulously beautiful part of the world, totally untouched. Coming around the top of the North Island there, we've now got to the west of Kaitaia. We've got the Rianga Basin. That big blue strip you can see out up the top is the New Caledonia Basin, and then you've got the Taranaki Basin down there, which is our only producing basin today. So the entire petroleum sector in New Zealand is entirely here, and this is a bit of a schematic of some of the seismic surveying lines that have been done. New Zealand is considered to be a grossly underexplored nation with potentially tremendous resources. So coming back to those basins, 18 sedimentary basins, 1 Taranaki producing today, at least 8 that are very highly prospective. So as Stuart said, we're the submerged continent, and we've got, I think, the 3rd or 4th largest mineral resource base by some calculations anywhere in the world. And that presents us with a great opportunity and a great challenge. Taranaki itself, we're offshore. We've got the Maui, Kupe, Kapuni onshore, Tui, Maori and Pohokura around the top. Maui been going since discovered in 69, on stream in 79, still going strong. It's been the backbone of New Zealand industry and electricity since 79, created the opportunity to do the syn fuels and Methanex and things like that. So absolutely phenomenal. When anybody says that this is an under-regulated industry, I would hate to see what a heavily regulated industry looks like, because I can tell you, you'd think we were in the Grand National Hurdle Race when it comes to drilling for oil and gas in New Zealand. The number of hurdles you've got to jump over, it is exhausting. This is a heavily regulated industry, make no mistake, and all the regulations and rules have been completely overhauled in the last 2 years. We have got as up-to-date regulations as anywhere in the world. Right, here's some exciting stuff. Cantan 4, drilling off Taranaki right now, semi-submersible rig, world scale. Coming soon, the Noble Bob Douglas. This is the Anadarko drill ship, brand new ship coming out of Singapore. The technology on these is just unbelievable. The Ensco 107 also coming, and that's going to be drilling here this year. That's at drilling in New Zealand a few years ago. Some fundamentals on oil and gas that you need to understand, and that is 9 out of 10 frontier wells are dry. They're dusters, you do or you do. When we talk about a risky industry amongst ourselves, the risk is we lose all our money. The Cantan out there is costing $1 million a day. The onshore rigs cost anywhere from $180,000 to $250,000 a day. It's huge money. The state wanted to develop these resources, it can't afford to, needs foreign money to do it. And of course local money from our local companies like Todd Energy, which invest so heavily here. Takes a long time to get this production underway. Now, Gareth talked about social licence, and again, I'm probably in Stuart's camp about, how you actually term this, but the fundamental reality is that we have to be absolutely open, honest and transparent about our industry, and that is what we're doing. There are no holds barred. You can ask what you like. We will show you. We've invited Gareth to come and have a look around with us. So far he hasn't taken up that opportunity, but we still want to do that and just show Gareth how we do operate here. But we've got to do that. We know that New Zealanders don't know very much about the petroleum sector, but we know there are very few that are against it. To me, the social contract is very, very clear from New Zealand, is get on and do it. Get the economic benefits, New Zealand needs it, but don't make a mess. I don't think New Zealand could say that any more clearly to us.
19 minutes.
19 minutes. So we're taking people around Taranaki, we're having a lovely time. And people come and see that the green grass grows up to the edge of our well sites, that we don't have any dead fish or anything like that. It's all actually very thoroughly done, very carefully done. We make a huge contribution to New Zealand. It is very, very real, the contribution. It is easily defined, and there is no question about what we produce. Here's some kids at the science fair, and it's fantastic. They are going to solve world hunger for us, because I think our generation hasn't been able to. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you, and welcome all your questions and discussion now. Thank you.
David, just before you go,